get back to Becky Quick, who I think has some big news. And Becky, I'll just say I monitor who lands at Teterboro, so I think I know who landed there about an hour ago.
You do that?
First of all, I just want to say, can I throw in "Frankly, my dear"? That should be your column name, Frank, or whoever wants to take that. Frankly, my dear.
Frankly, my dear. ...
But we do Andrew, I think you probably know who this is. I'm going to let you take a guess. If there's one person you most want to hear from today, who would it be?
Well, Elon Musk just landed at Teterboro an hour ago, so that's my guess.
Okay, that's
Very good guess, Andrew. That is excellent reporting, and that is who is headed here today. This is the 2-year hiatus. Since we've had a 2-year hiatus here at the Barron Investment Conference, we are back. We're live at the Metropolitan Opera House at Lincoln Center. This is the 29th annual Barron Conference, and Barron Capital is celebrating its 40th year. Every year, Ron Barron celebrates and has some huge surprises that come. But, guys, I don't think I've ever had a surprise guest who's been quite as big of a deal as Elon Musk today, because this is happening when Elon Musk is the center of kind of all news that heads through this. So, Ron, let's talk a little bit about that. You have Elon Musk coming here, and you're going to be interviewing him in front of your guests here.
Yes.
What are you going to ask him?
Well, I don't want to do the interview in advance, but I think that one of the interesting questions is that he's 51 years old. And he works 16 or 17-hour days, 7 days a week, and he flies all over the place. And why? And so he's the wealthiest man in the world. Why does he do this? And so we invest in people, and talented people, and driven people, and people with a mission. He's got a mission. And what's the mission? And it is remarkable how he does. I don't want to use him up. And the things, and everything is about trying to find out how things work and how you can do things better and how you can make the planet so it's habitable, and how you can get people off the planet if that comet comes that you're not expecting, and how you can, even wealth distribution around the world by making people educated. A certain percentage of people around the world, whether you're poor or rich, have genius capabilities, but you can't use them unless you have the internet. So he's making the internet available around the whole planet, as you saw what just happened with Ukraine. Another question I have that's really been bothering me is that how come where our government is making aid to Ukraine, and they pay for munitions, and they pay for all sorts of things, tanks and missiles, and how come they don't want to pay for the internet?
For Starlink.
For Starlink? How come? That's pretty strange.
You're an investor in SpaceX, too, so this matters. I think Elon tweeted out earlier this year that it's costing the company something like $80 million a year to provide that internet connectivity for Ukraine. More than that.
Probably $400 million a year. And so how come? And so he decided he was getting criticized for asking to be paid, and I don't really understand why that was. But I told him I thought that it was a good decision he made, and then he said, "The heck with it, I'll just pay for it." And so I think it was a good decision.
You thought that was the good decision?
Yes.
To say, forget it, let's just go and do it anyway?
Yeah, let's just do it anyway.
Yeah.
And humanitarian, and I think that that's going to serve him well. But everyone knows who Starlink is now. And all these different countries around the world, they know about Starlink. And if the government wants to get Starlink in other places, they would have to pay for that, obviously. But everyone's going to know about Starlink now, and everyone knows that. See, here it takes a couple years normally to get the government approvals, to get landing rights, to get the ability to communicate. And now all of a sudden, he did that in 48 hours. 48 hours, turned on the satellites going over Ukraine and gave connectivity.
Is that why he did it without trying to seek payment first, just to get it up and running?
He did it to help.
Yeah.
Zelensky called and said, our communications are going out, and what are we going to do? Can you help us? And so in 48 hours, shipped thousands of these user interfaces, and gave them to the troops, and then all of a sudden the governments can communicate with the troops.
I mean, is that why the government has a problem with it? I understand.
Our government?
Yeah, I understand entirely why Elon would go ahead and just turn it on and make it happen quickly.
And I think it's political.
You think it's political?
Yeah. So, remember when President Biden had a meeting at the White House where he was talking about how great it's going to be to have electrification of cars, and he invited the companies that are leading this transition, and the company he singled out as the leader was General Motors. And General Motors had sold 26 cars, 26 in a quarter, and we sell hundreds of thousands in a quarter, 300,000 or 400,000 a quarter. And they sold 26 cars, and they said that was the leader. And Elon wasn't invited. Why was that? And because it's not a union place. And the reason it's not a union place is because the workers there are better treated than they are in union places, and they all work hard, and they all become wealthy. One of the great stories is,
just to put that in context, you are somebody who has traditionally supported Democratic candidates.
I'm a Democrat my whole life.
So you're a Democrat your whole life. Obviously, it upset Elon. It sounds like it upset you, too.
Yeah, I don't understand a lot of Democratic policies. I don't understand Republican policies that are negative for, I don't give to politicians. And, I think that Elon was talking about in Twitter that one of his goals is to have the 20% of far left Democrats hate him and the 20% of far right Republicans hate him. That's his goal.
He's getting towards that.
Yeah, I think he is. Yeah. He's a really neat guy and very funny, and he's got a heart. And he does things that when we go back again, why would someone like that work the hours he works and be he lives in a house that is a tiny little house. He doesn't live there all the time, but that's his house in Boca Chica, in the facility there. He lives there. When he goes there, it's like a little mobile home thing. It's smaller than a mobile home. And he doesn't have any homes. In fact, one of the things that I thought was interesting, he said that when he bought Twitter, he wanted to have the Twitter headquarters closed down and turned into a homeless shelter. And so that made sense to me. He said, okay, now next couple or 3 weeks, he's going to live there. So I said, okay, I see. He's made it into a homeless shelter. He doesn't have a home. That's why he's made it into a home, so he could have someplace to live.
Well, speaking of Twitter, there's an article in the New York Times today that suggests layoffs are going to begin starting today, and it's going to be layoffs of around 3,000 or so people, maybe up to 50% of the staff there. You're an investor.
I thought it said 3,700.
3,700.
And there are 7,500 employees. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of people there that aren't very productive. They work from home. They haven't written very much code. I'm not the expert in Twitter yet. I will be in a couple of years, maybe sooner than that, but I'm not yet. And I think that the first thing you got to do is right-size the business, and then the opportunities they have are gigantic. This is the place where you have content. It's the other place you go to look at people's faces and their kids and stuff. Here you go to he wants to have a digital town hall, digital town center, where you can debate. But you have to make sure that you moderate and you don't have hate speech on there, and you don't have. There was something that was published a couple of days ago that said in the first time, as soon as you took it over, there were 50,000 tweets in 2 or 3 days with using the N-word.
Yes.
Or using anti-Semitic tropes. In 2 or 3 days, there were 300 accounts. So 300 accounts.
They were troll accounts that were trying to see what they could get away with. Yeah.
And so you don't want that. You want to have a verification of accounts for $8 a person, and you can verify, and then they can amplify your what you want to say and who you can reach.
I mean, he has made the statement to assuage advertisers that he doesn't want it to be a hellscape. He's been clear about that, but I think there are advertisers who have questions and concerns. There was another story today, I don't know if it was the Wall Street Journal, that just talked about General Mills, Volkswagen, a lot of different companies, potentially L'Oreal, that are looking at Mondelez and Pfizer. Those are some of the other ones that are pausing their ads on Twitter right now. Do you think that he's going to run it in a way that will bring those advertisers back and convince them that this is where they want to be?
I do, but I think that this is not just about money. And when you're talking about someone who's worth whatever he's worth, and going to be worth multiples of that in the future, trillions. And you're talking about $20 billion. To everyone in the world, it's a lot of money, but for him, it's not relevant. And what he's doing, his goal is not just to make a huge amount of money. His goal is to help democracy. And you help democracy, you don't help democracy. And he says the only way this works is that if a lot of speech that takes place there is stuff that he doesn't like. He says you don't want to hear it. But on the other hand, that's what democracy is. You argue about things.
But how do you decide between free speech and hate speech? That's the tricky
So
part.
that's an easy thing to do. Now, if you think about what TikTok does, the TikTok can, if you move your arm a certain way, they know what you want to watch.
Right.
And they know who you are. And if they watch enough things, then they know more about you than you know about yourself, and more than your wife knows. They know everything. But just moving. And for him to think about it, this guy sends up rockets and brings them back and lands them.
Right.
How could he not have software that can determine from the words that are being used and from the content that people are watching? They know more about everyone than anyone else because of the content. So they know all this, and therefore they should be able to figure out with software how to moderate and to prevent this hate stuff and anti-Semitic things and using N-words. They should not be allowed to do those things.
Yeah.
And he said even the sanctity of elections.
Yeah.
And so here, if everyone says it's true, how do you avoid disinformation? They should be able to do that with software.
We should point out, we spoke with the head of the ADL, Jonathan Greenblatt, yesterday. He had just had a meeting with other civil rights leaders and people with Elon Musk, and he was very complimentary. He said Elon said all the right things in this meeting. I think Andrew has a question for you as well. Andrew?
Hey, Ron, I was just trying to understand a lot of the things that Elon's trying to do right now with Twitter are effectively about fixing what might be described as traditional Twitter, meaning Twitter as we know it today. How much do you think, if we had this conversation 2-3 years from now, would Twitter look like it is today, meaning used as a social media platform? Or do you really think it is, and I think the prospect is that it turns into a true super app, possibly as a front end for all sorts of both financial payments. I've also long thought that if you ever think Tesla gets into the robo-taxi business, it becomes an install base and becomes the front end of that, and maybe he sells it to Tesla. I mean, these are very speculative ideas, but when you start to think sort of really big and long term about what this could be.
I don't think he sells it to Tesla. I think he could go public with it again. I think that's interesting. You're right about, he's fascinated with WeChat. Super app, I think that's interesting. Payments, that's where he started with PayPal and X. That was interesting to him. So you're right. So one of the stories I was telling Becky before was about me starting my career in the 1970s. And Jay Pritzker, Tom's dad, was someone who helped me out a lot at the very beginning when I was started. And one day we're sitting on an airplane, we're going to Memphis. And I said, Jay, what is, I'm a young guy, I'm like 30, and he said, Jay, what is the best deal you've ever done? And he said, the best deal I ever did was I bought a sawmill in Georgia for $50 million. And the person was selling me a sawmill that wasn't making very much money, but I was buying a forest that was worth $250 million. That was the best deal I ever made. And so the seller was selling one thing, he got a good deal for what he was selling, and he was buying something else when he got a good deal for buying. And so the same thing with Twitter. People are criticizing and saying he way overpaid. He didn't overpay. He bought something that had this installed base and had all this content, and he could do something with it. So it's not really, so the seller was selling one thing. The people who ran Twitter did a horrible job running it, but they did an incredible job getting the maximum value for the shareholders of Twitter when Elon bought it. And as far as Elon, he's bought something that he can make into something really special compared to what it is. Now we'll see if he can do it or not, but I have to study it. I'm not the expert on it yet. I will be, but I'm not yet.
All right, Ron is going to be with us throughout the next hour and a half or so before he has to leave. We're going to be hearing much more from him. In fact, coming up in just a little bit at 7:30 this morning, we're going to talk about the surge in lodging post-pandemic. We've got the CEOs of Hyatt and Vail right here from the Barron Investment Conference. Both of those companies are holdings in the Barron portfolio, so we've got much more to come. Andrew, I'll send it back over to you.